again and again to keep the girls alive, which is really touching and have some truth in it. So now I'm ready to answer any of your questions if you have any.
So do we want to unmute everybody? It's 28 of us. So maybe unmute everybody and raise your hand if you want to ask a question.
Everyone is now able to unmute themselves if they want
okay.
to ask a question, and then I'll ask that you go back on mute when you're done.
So, okay, I would like to ask a couple of questions just to start us out, because these are ones I told Rami I was going to ask him. Rami, can you please explain explain maybe is not the best word. Can you describe the Israeli nation state law and what that does to the Palestinians? I'm looking for you. There you are.
It's not doing anything to the Palestinians. It's doing a lot of harm to the Israelis, especially the Israeli Jews, because it creates the formal and juridical status of the apartheid state of Israel, because it puts the Jewish people above any other people, the Jewish nation. It emphasized the fact that this is more a Jewish state than a democratic state, and the Palestinians who are citizens of Israel by this law are citizens of second class. But half of the Palestinians are not citizens at all. They don't vote. They don't participate in the political life of the entity between the river and the sea. And in that sense, the nation law has no bearing on them. But the nation law is a law that should not exist in any law book of any nation.
Okay, you say apartheid. Why do you call Israel an apartheid?
Apartheid has many ways. Not all the ways of apartheid should be similar to the apartheid of the South African example. When you build different roads for Jews and for Arabs, when you have two sets of laws for Jews and others, when you have two sets of values and how you behave towards different kinds of citizens, and it comes to be active in any aspect of life, then you have an apartheid state on your hands, starting with the definition of a Jewish democratic state, which the minute the Jewish state is stronger than the democratic, this is an apartheid state, because it says that one nation, one ethnic group have more rights and privileges than all the others.
Thank you. So let's let somebody else ask a question and unmute themselves.
So a couple of people asked that you tell us the name of the book again, Rami.
Apeirogon. Apeirogon is, let me write it to myself.
Just to say, I sent it out in the latest email today. So you'd have it on your computer in the latest email. It's in there with a link to the review, and it's also in the action steps under books. You have a link there of how you can get it.
But I'll give it anyhow. It's Apeirogon. Apeirogon. Apeirogon.
Yes. Someone else with a question? Eldon.
Hi, excuse me. I have a lot more experience in as a student of the lessons of the Holocaust and in kind of the fighting or, being resistant against anti-Semitism in its forms in the world, and kind of the way anti-Semitism is used and as an opening wedge in so many conflicts and places around the world. So I'm very sensitive to that and kind of in tune to that. And I feel like I often fall for the, I get bogged down with the idea that calling attention to this situation in Israel between Israel and Palestinians is somehow an anti-Semitic cover for people that truly do think that maybe Israel is worse than other oppressive societies, or that have real animosity for Jews for some reason, which is kind of at the core of anti-Semitism. And I guess I don't know what my question is, but I struggle there, and I think a lot of well-intentioned liberal Americans get tripped up there too. So I guess my question is, what do you think I should watch out for as I move into this, to not lose my commitment against anti-Semitism and to be a stronger ally for both Jews and the bigger process? That's a big question, but I'll take anything at this point. Thank you.
Well, I really thank you for this question, because it really is a very important question. If you watch me on the film, when I said that ruling and oppressing and humiliating millions of people without any democratic right for so many years is not Jewish, and being against it is not anti-Semitism, I think it sums it up. We are a nation that carry on our backs 3,000 years of victimhood. It's not an invented victimhood, it's a real victimhood. But we do not allow anyone else to be victim. We are the ultimate victim. No one else is allowed to be victim. We send our kids to Auschwitz when they are 16 years old, and they come back draped with the national flag. And the next day they are going to the army, and they have to stand in a checkpoint, and they have to make a decision whether this 70 years old guy walking towards them is a time bomb or just a grandfather. So this is inhuman, and this is the essence of everything. We should get rid of the victimhood mentality, which we hide behind it, and justify things that cannot be justified in any nation, not just the Jewish nation. So what I call for people, what I urge people, the Holocaust was universal, not Jewish. The Holocaust was a universal event, and its lessons is that people should respect each other and not humiliate each other.
Does that answer it to start there, Eldon?
Yes, I guess I feel like there's, I still sometimes have a concern that people use the Palestinian situation in Israel as kind of a reason to raise up some level of unaware anti-Semitism that they might have themselves. I'm talking about Gentiles or others, and kind of use it as an excuse to show how bad, Jews are or whatever. And it can get twisted around quickly. And I've seen that happen. And I want to make sure that I'm clear about where the problem is and to stand up to the anti-Semitism so that we don't start getting kind of a soft view of the picture.
I would like to add one sentence to it. Recently, the Israeli government and the Jewish organizations use this cry of anti-Semitism to prevent any kind of criticism on what's going on in the occupied territories. What's going on the occupied territories, you don't have to be anti-Semite to reject it. You have to be a human being.
Yes. The same thing is
Can I ask you a
happening
question?
in the United States. In college campuses, they're trying to block people from raising these issues and making it illegal to raise them, and getting rid of teachers who raise them, professors. So it's not just in Israel that that's happening, or in the West Bank. That's across our nation too, that to raise the concern about what happens to the Palestinian people, you can go to jail in some places. They're making it illegal. Somebody had a question?
Yes, this is Marvin.
Oh,
And
Marvin.
yes, hi. We've talked a little bit about this, but thank you very much for your presentation and for being with us to discuss this really important matter. You know, I obviously an African American, grew up, you know, and primarily, and was not very well educated about the situation in Palestine or the history of the Jews. In fact, what I saw on TV was about Palestine and sympathized greatly. But I was talking to Catherine about an experience I had a couple of years ago where I did visit Auschwitz and some of the other death camps in Poland. And it really, for me, it brought that experience of the Jews, you know, home in a way that I had never experienced before. And so I had a profound kind of understanding of the need for a homeland, given the 1,000-year history that you talked about, that I learned about in the museum in Warsaw, for example. And so I guess I'm curious, but at the same time, I disagree with the way the Palestinian people are being treated. And I guess I'm curious in terms of what you think about what the solution would be. You know, is it that the Israelis need to give up the occupied land and live in peace with the Palestinians? I mean, I've heard different things, and I've also heard people suggest that the Jews need to leave Israel entirely, right? So, what is your recommendation as far as a solution?
Oh, good. I'm not a politician, and I don't have solutions out of my sleeve, and I cannot promise that if you take this solution or this solution or that solution, everything will be okay. Nothing will be okay. I don't know. I cannot promise. What is on the table is an agreement, which is already very close to being signed. Most of the people know deep in their heart what should be done in order to finish this stupid conflict tomorrow morning. You can have one state, you can have two states, you can have 10,000 states, you can have a confederation or federation or whatever. Between the river and the sea, there are 12 million people, half of them Jews, half of them Israelis, Palestinians. The Israelis will not be able to throw the Palestinians to the desert, and the Palestinians will not be able to throw the Jews to the sea or bring them back to the countries where they came from. It will not happen. We are doomed to live there together, and we can live there together on one condition. And this is one word. The word is respect. You must be able to respect the guy next to you exactly as you want to be treated, no more and no less. A state is not something sacred. A state is a tool that you can use in order to bring you security, in order to bring you roads. You pay taxes, you get services. You don't pray for the state. You don't kneel for the state. You don't sacred the state. The state is a tool. So I'm certain that one day we will get there. We will get there in 1 year or 2 years. It took the Irish people 800 years to get to their solution, and they don't like each other even today. And I'm certain that one day we will have peace because this is inevitable. The question is how long it will take, I believe it will happen when the price of not having peace will exceed the price of peace. And then we will crawl back to the negotiating table where we stopped 21 years ago. Camp David.
Someone else have a question?
Conser's.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you. It's good to see and hear this. We were connected with the church before we moved to Portland that ran an organization called Hands of Peace, and I wonder if you're familiar with that. or have heard
Absolutely,
of it.
yes.
Oh, you
And
are.
they-
Okay, good,
And respectful.
good. Does that? I guess we should. Dick was going to exchange. You could say what they do and. But we've wondered all along the years and years that we've been involved with it. Does it really help? Does it make an impact? Does it have? But maybe first we should explain what it is.
Mhm.
Well, the groups of youth, Palestinian, Israeli youth, and some from the United States as well, meet together and enjoy activities together in the United States, and seemingly, of course, they talk about the situation, their experiences, and their ideas of what could improve the situation. They take it back to the Holy Land, and we understand that they get together and see whether they can improve the situation there. We don't know. They seem to be become very close to people that they've met together with over a period of a year. We don't know whether the effect is widespread enough to encourage this kind of thing, or whether this is just a drop in the bucket.
So that's what we're asking, I guess. What?
Well, there are dozens and hundreds of peace organizations and efforts all around trying to bring Israelis and Palestinians closer to one another. But this is really a drop in the sea, because we are facing a reality in which we are just like people who are trying to draw water from the ocean with a little spoon full of little holes. And we are facing a political situation in which the right wing in Israel is overcoming and getting into power. And it's really very, very difficult, our reality. Until recently, the American right wing was supporting the Israeli right wing. I hope it will change now. But basically, it's an ongoing struggle, and there are no shortcuts.
Thank you. We'll keep supporting them and hope for the best.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, another question from somebody else? Betsy, did you have your hand up?
Yes, they do. Back in around 2001, I think 2002, I did some units with my middle school students on this question, and we watched the movie Promises, which dealt with, they were both Israeli and Palestinian children. I can't help but think now, where are those kids? They're in their 30s. I
You
just,
know that they did a sequence, another promises. Yes, they did. You look for it, Google it. It's an amazing movie.
The same kids, Rami?
The same kids, yeah.
Oh,
One
wow.
of one of the Palestinians lives in the United States.
okay, so there's a sequel. All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's an amazing movie. And when it was done back then, it was different times. This was the times of Oslo. This was the times of when Israelis and Palestinians could get together. Today's situation is completely different,
How?
much worse. Israelis cannot
It's
and
much,
won't go to the West Bank. Palestinians are not allowed to come to Israel, and they need special permits to move around. And the whole situation is much, much worse. In any case, back then there was not a wall. Today there is a wall, concrete wall. Everything is different.
wow.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Yeah. Hear me okay?
Yes.
Rami, I'm wondering lately, when I've heard speakers talk about this issue, they've made the comment that the majority of Israelis don't really have an understanding of what's happening in the West Bank and don't, that it's not a big issue. It's nothing important in their lives. And I'm wondering if there's any sort of campaign or effort to educate the Israeli young people, maybe, or even older people, to the situation, and that might help change the way the government is proceeding.
Wow, you touched an open wound. Uh,
What Rami does.
the Israeli public don't know what is going on 200 meters below their down their noses. They sit not recently, but just now it's reopening. They like to sit in the coffee houses. They like to speak. They like to drink. They like to live the good life, and they don't know what is going on there in the occupied territories. The word occupation is out of the question. It's not in the vocabulary of the Israeli audience. They prefer not to know. They don't want to know. And the Israeli media is cooperating with this. And the Israeli government is covering all over it because the Israeli government has an interest to hide what is going on in the occupied territories. So we get to a situation where we are not allowed to get into high schools to the parent circle to tell the stories of our Palestinian friends and it doesn't have to come from above, from the government. It comes from the parents. They don't want to listen to the terrorists. So we are facing a situation in which, and it happens on both sides. When me and Bassam are getting into a high school class, for most of these kids, it's the first time ever in their life they watch an Israeli and a Palestinian together, which are not fighting each other, which are calling each other brother, unheard of, which are not putting their pain on the table trying to compare whose pain is bigger. And this creates, and they are not as polite and receptive as you are. You are walking into the open mouth of an active volcano. These kids are being raised and educated and brainwashed to hate each other. And this is being done by hiding the other side and demonizing the other side. So the whole situation is of separation, not bringing people together. And this is our worst enemy. This is what we are fighting against.
Rami, your wife has written books in terms of the educational system in Israel. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, this is connected to what I just spoke about. My wife wrote a book, which is a very famous one. It's translated to many languages. The name is Palestinians in Israeli School Books. She's a professor in the Hebrew University for Education, and her specialty is teaching and analyzing school books, textbooks, which are getting into the class. And she studied more than 200 Israeli school books in which she showed what are the characters of the Palestinians being conveyed in these books. How do you create out of a nice Jewish boy a killer?
Mhm. They usually show the Palestinian as a farmer,
Yeah.
right? That kind of thing, just
Yeah,
kind of.
all this, there is you should read the book. The book is very, very interesting. How do you create in the minds of little kids? And it can happen in India, and it can happen in the United States. It can happen everywhere.
Yeah.
Little kids are very easy to manipulate. And when you show them a Palestinian who looks like Alibaba with the shoes, strange shoes and riding a camel, this is the image that he has of a Palestinian, not of a doctor, not of a professor, not of a poet like Mahmoud Darwish or whatever. Now, when it's being done systematically, in all spectrum of life, when you are talking about Palestinian villages and cities and put ideas in the minds of these kids, when they go to the army, it's very easy for them to look at these natives from up to down and treat them the way they do.
Yep. Thank you, Rami. Anybody else? Another question? Yes,
Beverly, I think. Oh,
Jeff? Jeff, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. It's a privilege to have you here, Rami, and thank you for your impressive commitment with the Parent Circle and also Combatants for Peace. I just started reading the Paragon, and you shed some light by comparing it to the 1001, is it Arabian Nights? Because it's broken up like you were talking about in very small little segments. So I wasn't sure what the author's intent was, but now it makes a lot of sense. So thanks for sharing that. So I've been to Israel, Palestine a couple of times, and one of the things that was most disheartening was what you were talking about, the lack of opportunity for Palestinians and Israelis to meaningfully interact on an equal footing. And so I think what you're doing really is such a amazing example, and it goes counter to what is often the reality in Israel, Palestine, having you and Bassam side by side as respected, respecting each other deeply, and that speaks volumes. So I just want to say how impressive that is. I do know that there potentially are a couple schools in the Israel, like in Jaffa and maybe in Haifa, where there's both Palestinian Israelis as well as Jewish Israelis. Is that like a venue for you and Bassam and others in these groups to, have people hear that your personal stories as well as the respect that you have for one another? And that's the main question. And then the second question is, just reading the Paragon, just want to know if you're still riding your motorbike.
Yeah. I'll start with the second question because it's easier. Yes, I'm still riding my motorbike. Callum took some liberties, and when I start reading the book and he was talking about me jumping on my bike, riding towards the wild west of the west bank of the Jordan, changing gear, and I told him, Callum, but my motorbike is automatic. And said, no, it's more sexy. More sexy to have gear. I can very proudly tell you that my two grandchildren are going to a bilingual school in Haifa. It's called Yad B'Yad, Hand in Hand. It's a whole network of schools all around the country, which bring Israeli and Palestinian kids together. My grandson speaks fluent Arabic in a way that makes me very, very happy. And humbly, I think this is the future. I mean, this is the only way to go forward. But I can very regretfully say that it's, again, a drop in the sea. A drop in the sea of hatred, of nationalism, of ethnicism, of the inability to listen to each other.
Beverly?
So how do those schools happen to be? Who organized them? Who made them happen?
Oh, there is a network. You have to understand that these schools are only in Israel, not in the Palestinian Authority, not in the Palestinian territories, only in the, and parents gathered together and created a network, people who want their children to listen and learn in both languages and celebrate all the holidays of all religions and create a little human beings that can speak to each other. So this is, we have a school in Haifa, we have a school in Jerusalem, we have a school in Jaffa, we have many schools like this. Look for it. It's called Hand in Hand, and it's a blessed initiative.
Sounds like something that should be supported.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Along other organizations like the Parent Circles and
Right,
Combined.
yeah.
Yes.
So what difference, if the US changed what they did with the aid that they gave to Israel, would that have any effect on what goes on in this regard?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, when Bassam met John Kerry, the Secretary of State at the time, he was curious about, Bassam became very famous, he wanted to see him, and he asked him to tell him the story, and he told him the story, and he said, you know, my daughter was shot with an American rubber bullet from an American M16 rifle, from an American Jeep, by an American dressed with, by an Israeli dressed with American uniform, made in the United States. The key to the ability to solve anything in this area is the ability of the Americans to be honest broker, and they are not.
Right.
They never have been. And they hide by the commitment for the security of Israel. Israel do not need any commitment for their security. Israel is the 10th biggest army in the world. Israel is a nuclear power. Israel should be encouraged to do things which will serve its security and not damage it by continuing harassing the Palestinians in the occupied territories.
Thank you.
Rami, when I went over there, I remember these big red signs near the checkpoints. And I don't read Hebrew, but they told us that it was saying essentially that Jews should not go through these checkpoints because it would be dangerous for them to go into the West Bank. Is that true?
No, it's not. It doesn't say dangerous. It says it's illegal.
Oh, it's illegal.
It's
Great.
illegal for Israelis to cross to the Area A of the Palestinian Authority. I, for example, for the last 4 years and ever since, and all throughout the last 25 years, I break the Israeli law every morning when I go to my office in Bejala. And this is one of the ways to separate us. But there are so many Israelis that break this law because they believe that some laws are not meant to be kept.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about Miko Peled is your wife's brother, and he tried to get supplies into Gaza. Can you just take a moment and tell that story?
I'm not really deep into it. I'm not familiar with the details. I know that he's very well appreciated around the world as a peace activist. A very
Okay. There was something with the tunnels. They were trying to take wheelchairs through, and
yeah, but it
stopped
failed. It failed. The whole situation in Gaza is so horrible and so problematic and so and the world is standing aside and doing nothing about it, that I have no words to say how painful it is in Gaza
Yes.
today.
Yeah, it's got electronic cover over top by Israel. It's got the fence, and it's got Navy boats, Israeli Navy boats, shooting people if they try to go out to fish. And
No, they cannot do anything, and the Egyptians are cooperating with the Americans and with the Israelis to hold this bubble. And when you push someone to the corner and you don't give him any kind of outlet, they hit you back. I mean, the whole situation is inhuman. I think it's on the verge of collapse and disaster.
yeah. Okay, that was just one thing. Okay, another question from our group. Jill Henderson.
Yes, and also thank you for being here. I've been 7 times since 2008 and volunteer in a couple of schools in Ramallah. I'm Episcopalian, so we have a lot of, institutions there. And I'm curious with talk of elections, if you might give your perspective on elections, both in Israel and potentially in Gaza and Palestine, what that looks like to you, if anything, especially Palestinian elections and leadership. I know that's a giant area, but.
Well, we haven't had an election in Palestine for since 2005.
Right.
Last election, Hamas won, and it created an excuse for Israel to cut all legitimacy of Palestinian politics. Israel is using Hamas as a tool. There is no one to talk to. There is nothing to talk about. It's very convenient not to have someone to talk to, because then you don't have to give up anything. So Hamas, in many ways, is an ally of Israel in preventing any kind of agreement. In Israel, the situation is really unstable. We have elections. We have now the third elections in a period of 2 years, which is unprecedented, and the country is divided between right and left, and the country is divided between not so much about the Palestinians and the occupied territories and the economic situation. The country is divided for people who are for Bibi Netanyahu and the people who are against Bibi Netanyahu, and it will go on like this because there is no definition. The vast majority of the population in Israel is leaning towards the right. There are more than 80 members of the Knesset who are right-wingers, one way or the other, and I don't see any change in the near future in that manner.
Do you think they'll hold elections in Palestine? Is there anyone to?
There are talks now about organizing talks. If they will know that Hamas will take over again, they will hesitate to do it. It's very, very difficult to say. I hear from my Palestinian friends that they don't believe that the election will take place, and even if they will take place, it will not be honest.
So they're kind of stuck with the current leadership,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. When I was over there, I think it was 2006, the leadership in Bethlehem had just been elected, and they were Hamas leadership. We met with them. We went back a year later, and all of them had been arrested. So, you know, a Democratic elected group was put in prison.
Yeah.
By Israel. Another question, Lynn? Got to unmute yourself.
Yes, I really appreciate all that you are doing and have done, and the work that you're bringing people together and to educate us, and your work here. I'm just wondering, if you don't mind me asking, what do you do to care for yourself? What do you do to lift your spirits? What do you do to take a break? Or, you know, how can you keep going?
I have no other alternative. I have a wonderful family. I have I have a reason to get up in the morning. This is what gives me the strength to go on. And you know, I always say when I give a lecture in a high school class, Israeli or Palestinian high school class, and in the end of the class, there will be only one kid who's nodding his head with acceptance to this message. It's for me a kind of a miracle. It means that I saved one drop of blood. In Judaism, one drop of blood is the whole world. And I think this gives me the strength to go on. I have no other way. I have no alternative.
You also have those beautiful grandkids I get to see on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Another question? I can't see hands on everybody.
I can jump in with one.
Yeah.
You already spoke to what a difference it would make if the US wasn't supporting Israel's military. But beyond that, Catherine has sent us a list of many actions that we can take. She sent us that email. And I'm just curious to hear from you why it feels important to you to have people in the US or just beyond Israel and Palestine engage in this and take action.
This is a beautiful question. And it marks the end of every meeting that we have, me and Bassam and other members of the Parent Circle. I tell them that, and I tell everyone, I'm the son of a Holocaust survivor. My late father was an Auschwitz graduate. And 70 years ago, 75 years ago, while they took my grandparents to the ovens back in Europe, the free and civilized world stood aside, never lifting one finger. And today, more than 75 years later, while this genocide is taking place in Syria, while people are drowning in the Mediterranean like flies and nobody cares, while Turks are killing Kurds with American authorization in the Iranian border, and atrocities wherever you look. And the free and civilized world is really standing aside, doing nothing, which is really horrible, which is awful. When you see a crime being committed and you do nothing, it's also a crime. You don't have the privilege to stand aside and do nothing. You are a human being. You belong to the human kind. You must take action. You must not stand aside, because otherwise what will happen to you is what happened to me. I was living in a bubble until I was 46 years old. I was doing my own thing. I was minding my own business. I was concentrated in my own little issues until my bubble blew up. And I think it's better to do it without the bubble being blown up.
Thank you.
Rami, how did you get involved in the parent circle?
I lost my daughter on the 4th of September 1997. It was the first day of school. And I thought to myself that I could go on living, pretending as if nothing had happened. And I got back to my studio, but I'm a graphic designer by profession. I had a big studio in Jerusalem, and I thought that I could go on as if nothing had happened, but nothing was normal anymore. I was not the same person anymore. And about a year later, I met Yitzhak Frankenthal, who was the founder of the Parent Circle. And he invited me over to watch a meeting of this group of crazy people, the Parent Circle. I was 47 years old. And it was the first time ever in my life that I met Palestinians as human beings, not as workers in the streets, and not as terrorists, and not as transparent people, as human beings who carry the same burden that I carry, who suffer exactly like I suffer. And I was so deeply moved, and that I ever since then I devote my life to this activity of mine.
Thank you. Another question?
I think they have a sympathy for me, and they want to let me go to bed.
Oh, there's Jeff. He's got his hand up. Okay, Jeff, got to unmute.
Okay.
No bedtime yet, Rami. No
yeah.
bedtime. Get that coffee going.
Well, I saw the movie, the documentary Seen Through the Wall, which was very moving and touching, and you and Bassam were in that. And that had to do with a group of Jewish Americans who were going over maybe for the first time to see Israel, Palestine. And it was, people can go over there to visit and not see the realities, because they just have a designed itinerary that kind of avoids seeing the harsh realities. Do you and your groups that you're involved with, like the Parent Circle and Combatants for Peace, do you reach out to pilgrim groups, whether they're Jewish Americans or Christian Americans or secular, to have them get a sense of what reality is like and not have like kind of blinders on?
Absolutely. We have a special branch that now for the last year, because of COVID, no groups are coming, but before that, and I hope that in the future, many groups, this is the story of Kala Mekan. Kala Mekan met us as one of these groups that met the Parent Circle and heard the story of what is going on. And this is an excellent way to open eyes of people who want to look a little beyond the propaganda.
I want to put a plug in for the Tree of Life Educational Fund group that's in your action steps under Journey. And also Jeff Meckel, I can never say his name, McElwee, has a group that's going over as well. And both of those groups will meet with peacemakers on both sides of the wall. And that's the difference between going and just seeing holy sites and hearing the propaganda from Israel and hearing from peacemakers. It's a very different tour, and I really encourage you, if you're interested in going, to go with one of those groups.
Catherine Maria Khoury raised her hand.
Say again, please.
Maria
Maria
has.
Fugeri,
Maria.
raise her hand.
Oh, I can't see that. Okay, Maria, yes.
Um,
Oh, there you are.
yeah. Rami, I wanted to say I'm a Greek American. I lived outside of Jerusalem in Taibe. My husband makes the Taibe beer, and I can't get any of the Israeli friends to come to Taibe after 2000, of course, because before 2000, many Israeli friends will come. So I'm wondering how many people, the percentage, are like you. How can we get the percentage to be increased so we can see, you know, the humanity in each other on the other side? I'm really just you are such a better human being than me, that's for sure, because I can't imagine the rage and the revenge and the hate I will have in my heart if someone so close to me is hurt. So this is what stays with us, the hate, the revenge. And this is, you know, what we see in each other. And how many people are like you right now in Israel? And how can we get this percentage to be increased, to see the humanity in each other? So when I tell my friends, please come see how we make Palestinian boutique wine, they won't be scared to come.
Well,
They're
you know,
scared. They're
when
scared to come.
it was the first screening of the film of the Within the Eye of the Storm in Tel Aviv, and one of the audience stood up and asked Bassam, will you dare screen this film in Ramallah? And Bassam looked at him and said, are you crazy? It's full of Arabs over there. You didn't get the joke.
No.
Yeah, we are living by stereotypes. We are living by pictures in our heads. We have the boundaries in our heads, the walls in our heads. And these walls are the outcome of fear, which some people have an interest to put in your mind. And it's true for any opposite population all around the world, in any conflict possible. Our conflict is still alive. The Palestinian oppression and humiliation is happening every hour, every minute, and it's very, very difficult for people like me to penetrate. And this is exactly what we are trying to do. I know for fact that no one can listen to me and remain the same. No one can watch Bassam and remain the same. And there are no big promises. Nobody promised us a rose garden. And I cannot promise you that tomorrow all the people will be kind and open and willing to overcome their anger and their frustration and their own narrative and lend a hand to the other side. It will not happen. It's very complicated. I hope that what I'm doing contributes a little bit to narrow this gap. Unfortunately, there are not so many of us.
Rami, are you training up some other people behind you to do just the same thing?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, you don't have to train. There are hundreds of members in the parent circle who are active in many activities. We are doing everything in our power to narrow this gap, and the activity is amazing. It's really amazing, especially in this time of COVID, when Israelis are not allowed to understand for the first time in their life what the meaning of closure is, which is regular for the Palestinians. And we do a lot of Zoom meetings, and Palestinians says, it's the first time I can get into your house without a permit. So it's an ongoing struggle, and there are many, many people in the parent circle that are doing it quite successfully.
Lynn?
I just was thinking, the last I heard in the news was that Israel was held up as the model for getting the COVID vaccine out to their citizens, but I understand, or I want to find out what is happening for Palestinians, if anything, for vaccines.
Nothing.
That's
Israel
what I was
has
wondering.
an excellent health system with the whole medicine structure is very efficient, and we are really, most of us are vaccinated twice now, and we're now struggling to influence the government to give the Palestinians the vaccines, because we feel, and there is a whole campaign that we are now in the middle of it, we feel that Israel must be responsible for the health of the Palestinians, especially in Gaza. It's in Israeli interest to vaccinate the Palestinians as much as possible. But like any other thing, it's an ongoing struggle.
Something like 2,000 people have it in the West Bank. I think that's right. And the hospitals are overrun now. They don't have space for people. They're keeping them outside of the hospitals.
Yeah, absolutely. The
Yeah.
situation over there in the West Bank, it's a miracle that that in Gaza it hasn't spread out more than it is. No one can explain it, but the situation in the West Bank is not good.
Yeah, it's deteriorating. Okay, another question? We're not letting you go to bed, Rami. You can't go to bed yet.
The global ministries, of which the United Church of Christ and the Christian Church has a weekly call to action around human rights in Palestine, Israel, and they just issued this new call to action concerning asking President Biden to speak out to defend Palestinian human rights to ensure a free, equitable distribution of COVID-19 for Palestinians. I put the link in the chat.
Good. They have not given vaccines. They have not given any kind of infrastructure to get the vaccines into people's arms. The supplies to protect people who are medical workers, none of it at this point in the West Bank. And to me, that is apartheid and also genocide, frankly. That's how I see that. Another question, who else? Can't see. Yeah, Jill, just unmute yourself.
Yes, I am. So I just, going back to about Zooms during COVID, we've been doing a lot of Zooms, and I'm a big believer in film salons, like have been done through this organization, which is great, because you can engage people and it doesn't seem to threaten them. And Zoom makes it nice and easy to get people from anywhere. So a couple of questions would be, are there certain films that you suggest that you start with a group? And my other question would be, is it possible over Zoom to get speakers from Parent Circle? Maybe not at 5 in the morning or 3 in the morning or whatever, maybe a better time for you,
4 in the
or for
morning
your
for
colleagues.
There will always be some crazy people like me that will accept. Of course, I will send Catherine the name and the mail address of the people who are doing it in the Parent Circle, and I'm sure they will be more than happy to do it. This is one, and the best thing to get in touch with the parent circle and get lectures and be involved is to register to the American Friends of the Parent Circle,
Yes.
which is a huge organization which support us a lot with a lot of connections, and they do a whole lot of activities. Which, if you want to be in touch, this is the way to do it.
That's great.
That would be great. Yeah, because I always, when I take pilgrimages over, we do go to refugee camps, and we do more of a witness tour, because I do believe you can't just see the holy sites. You have to see the people. So thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
To me, the holy sites have become the people who are doing this work.
That's right.
They're the holy sites. Rami was one of them for me, along with others as well, but Rami was definitely one for me. Anybody else? Another question?
I saw Thomas trying to speak and wonder.
Tom?
No, okay.
Sure.
I'm just engaged.
You're engaged.
Okay.
Okay. I'm glad you're engaged.
Innovated.
Yeah. Another person? Speak up, because I can't always see with the gallery type of situation here. Rami, I'll just ask you, I read somewhere, and I cannot remember where, but the reaction of your lovely wife after the death of Smedar, when big political leaders came to the house and asked her what she wanted to do for revenge. Can you say something about that? Do you remember, or should I just say it?
No, say it. I don't remember.
Okay. She said essentially, why would I want to have another mother feel as I do? And that's what takes the power out of revenge. If you can put yourself in the shoes of somebody else and not do to them what's been done to you. The other thing was something about your family's, maybe it was Nurit's family, coming to Israel and then was offered a Palestinian home.
Yeah, Nurit's father was a general in the Israeli army, and back in 48, they were offered a Palestinian house after the 48 war, and they rejected it. Nurit is also famous because she was a schoolmate of Bibi Netanyahu. And when he called to comfort her, she blamed him. It was the first time in the history of terror that the victim of terror blamed the real source of terror, the origin of terror, which is the occupation. And what she also said is that what her definition of sides, and she said, my side is all these people, Israelis, Palestinians, Arabs, Jews, Christians, who are supporting peace and are willing to pay the price of peace, and the other side, all the others.
Yeah. Yep. It's the best way to see it. I always think about the struggle in the United States when we have the government doing things that I can't stand. It doesn't make me anti-American to stand up against them. It doesn't make me anti-Zionist to stand up against a government who's acting this way towards a whole group of people. That's how I see that struggle. I equate those two. Someone else, or shall we move on to other steps of the evening? And Rami, you cannot leave us.
I'm excused?
No. Is there another question from somebody?
Catherine, I was
Yeah.
just going to say, after we watched imprisoning a
generation.
Whoops. With
You're breaking up for some reason. Darlene, you want to try again? Maybe just don't move around.
Again with you. And the first time I saw, I
Maybe she should shut down her camera, then it will be easier.
Okay, shut your camera and we'll see. Turn off your
let's see.
video.
I don't, let's see, how do I do that?
Well, it's working
Yeah.
better. Maybe if
Bring
you
up
just
at
don't
the
move
top.
around.
I don't know. Okay,
Can you hear?
but I thought
That's not working, Darlene. I'm so sorry.
She could put it in the chat.
Yeah, put your question in the chat, I guess, Darlene. Someone else want to ask something? We'll come back to Darlene if she's got that in the chat.
I'll ask something. Darlene's my mom, and I think she said this, like, I think I know where she's gonna go. When she saw the movie Imprisoning a Generation, that has to do with Israeli military detaining and imprisoning Palestinian children because they're under military law, not civil law. That when my mom saw the movie the first time, she saw it from the perspective of the Palestinians. And then more recently, as she saw the film, she saw it from the perspective of the Jewish or Israeli soldiers and what might go through their minds and their families' minds, like their parents, seeing that their children who are IDF soldiers or interrogators treat young Palestinian children, both boys and girls who are like 13, 14 years old, who are just not even proven, but just even accused of throwing stones, and then they're detained and taken away from school and traumatized, and their lives are very emotionally affected by it, as well as their families. So just seeing this reality of child imprisonment and detention from the perspectives of both the perpetrators and those who are victimized.
So what happens to the soldiers? Is that kind of the direction, Joff?
Or like a lot of it is psychological, what's going on in this situation of military occupation and apartheid. It's very, it's a lot of people kind of equate Israel, Palestine as like a settler colonial situation. So it has to do with colonizing the mind and decolonizing the mind. And a lot of this has to do with education. And Rami talked about this as far as the curriculum being very stereotypical, where they see people as who they never encounter as enemies. And just the fact that young IDF soldiers have what mindset it requires for them to do the actions that they do, and then how their parents and mothers how they may feel knowing that their children are maybe abusing or detaining Palestinian children. So that's kind of the recap.
Okay. We only have about another minute here, Rami, for you to give another answer. So this is your big chance.
You mean answer for the children in prison?
For the soldiers.
What can I say? I mean, I was talking about it. It's a mindset. It's like a curse. You go to the army, you stand in a checkpoint, you are not yourself, you are God. You have to make decisions. If you have ever read the story by George Orwell, Shooting an Elephant, where he describes the role of a British colonialist officer in India in face of the crowd, where he is not himself, he is not his education, not his background, not his values, not his morals, anything. He is a tool of the colonialist machine, and he's expected to do something which he really doesn't want to do. And this is exactly the same here. He stands in a checkpoint. He doesn't know what he's doing there. It's not his values, it's not his moral, but he will pull the trigger anyhow because he's afraid. He's full of fears, and the fears is not of the actual scenario that is going on the ground, but 3,000 years of fear that is being injected under his skin from the day he was born.
Rami, do the soldiers typically tell their families what they've done and what they've seen, or is it pretty much a silent situation, except for the breaking the silence group?
No, breaking the silence is a wonderful example of it. They go to the army, they do what they do, then they get out, then one night they wake up and say, oh God, what have I done? And they go to breaking the silence.
Yeah, but many of them don't tell their parents or their loved ones or their dating partners.
I don't think so, no.
But that's what I've heard, but I don't, that's from the outside looking in.
No, I don't think so. There is nothing to be proud of.
Exactly. Okay, dear friend, do you want to take off and go get some sleep?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I cannot thank you enough for getting up and doing this for us. You are just such a remarkable human being.
Thank you so much. You see, this is the reason why I'm doing it.
I hope to see you over there again sometime.
Good night. I hope to see you all. I will send you names and addresses and links and everything. I will give you 1,000 links that you can spread around all
Okay. Thank you. Get a good rest and know you've done a wonderful job in sharing with us.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you very much. Good night.
So everybody else, Tom, where are you? If you'll share anything, if anybody has questions about the resolution and endorsing that, that's my alarm to myself.
Well, thanks, Catherine. I appreciate the chance here to spend, what did you give me, 3 minutes? We'll make
2
it
minutes.
quick.
You got 2 minutes now.
3 minutes.
Okay,
So
3 minutes.
It's great to see a lot of familiar faces here tonight. I think many of you know, most of you know, I'm a member of the United Church of Christ. My home church remains in Hillsboro, Oregon, First Congregational United Church of Christ in Hillsboro, Oregon. And one thing I learned joining this movement for justice quite late in life, one thing I learned is that we in the United Church of Christ have every 2 years a big national gathering all at one place. And coming to the gathering are typically around 3,000 United Church of Christ folks. And lots of things happen at this every other year gathering. There's singing, there's praying, there are inspirational speakers, there are tutorials. But another thing that happens is that resolutions are brought forth for the consideration, discussion by the assembled plenary group, and then voting, yay, thumbs up or thumbs down. And for many, many years, there have been many resolutions brought to this General Synod concerning a just peace and a nonviolent peace in Israel, Palestine, Israel. About 8 years ago, there was a resolution that was voted favorably in support of nonviolent, now what do they call it? Basically, economic leverage, exerting your boycott and divestment to help put pressure on Israel to change its ways. About 6 years ago, there was a resolution put forth on behalf in favor of boycotts, divestment, and sanctions, governmental sanctions to help Israel change its ways. And that too was voted, in fact, overwhelmingly positive. And for that resolution, we got, it was put forth, it was scripted by the several hundred members of the Palestine-Israel Network. And we had, for that one, we had James Earl Carter as an endorser. We also had Archbishop Desmond Tutu write a letter of endorsement for that. About 4 years ago, there was another resolution, and this was about children, incarcerated children, highlighting what was happening to the children and in the Palestinian children, and calling for an end to it, calling for Israel to abide by international law and so on. And that was overwhelmingly supported by the attendees at that meeting. Now, this coming July is our next every other week or every other year meeting. And this will be because of COVID, it will be a virtual meeting, a virtual General Synod. And once again, the United Church of Christ Palestine Israel Network has put forth and scripted another resolution. And what I wanted to let you know is that that resolution has been endorsed by the required number of congregations to be submitted for consideration at the Synod. It will be considered. It's been accepted for consideration at Synod. And we are now looking for additional congregations to study it, to learn from this resolution. It's a very pithy resolution. That's a lot of stuff in it. And we're looking for congregations, asking congregations to study it and consider to be additional endorsers, so that by the time of the July meeting, we'll have an even longer list of endorsers to present to the attendees. You can find, by the way, the resolution has some teeth in it. It calls Israel's apartheid state an apartheid state.
Right.
Okay, it names it. Another thing it does is it names the military occupation as a sin, as a sin. So it really, it's a powerful, pithy, well-scripted resolution. You can find out about it here at the UCC PIN, United Church of Christ Palestine Israel Network webpage. That's uccpin.org. Just go there and they'll have links to it. Find out all about it. Q&As, text of the resolution, and so on. So if there's anything you can do to bring this forward and study it, just studying it would be great. That's the key thing. Read it, study it, talk about it. Thank you very much.
And for my part, I've sent you the resolution by email in the list of action steps, and also the way, why we're doing it now. That's in there as well. And then also the way to send an endorsement to the people who will then move it forward, to have your church listed as an endorsing church. The endorsing church doesn't mean you agree with the full resolution either. It just means you're moving it forward to be considered on the floor of General Synod. So, okay, great, Tom, thank you. If anybody has any questions on the action steps, I want to urge you to write to me, and I'm glad to answer any questions that you have. I am going to send out an evaluation form tomorrow to the whole group that's been gathered this entire time. And so if you can send that back by email, that would be great. An evaluation of the series. And Lynn, do you have some closing words for us?
I just want to thank you all for participating in this, and especially give thanks for Reverend Catherine Alder for all her work in putting this together. I think we should give her applause. She worked very hard to develop the program. I also want to thank Allison Brinkhorst, who showed her face now, for all her help and support in the tech, and for Reverend Cecil Prescott, who's hiding. And thank you, Tom, and others who have stopped in and spoken and helped in different ways. But this has been a very deep and very thoughtful, reflective time. So thank you all.
Okay, so I want to give some closing words and make sure this is on. If those people such as Rami El-Hanan, Bassem Aramin, Ibrahim Khalil can endure suffering and the tragic loss of loved ones and still speak of hope, what right do we have of hopelessness? If breaking the silence, soldiers can speak up against oppression that they committed in the West Bank and risk being called self-hating Jews and traitors for doing so, or if the refuseniks, those soldiers, those kids who refuse to go into the military in Israel, and then instead go to jail, shamed by their families and their communities and called Nazis because they hope to stop this occupation. What right do we have to hopelessness? Or the refugees who hope to go back to their homes and they still wear the keys around their necks, hoping to be able to go home to their homes that were lost in 1948. What right do we have to hopelessness? What right do we have to say it is too complicated or it has gone on too long? I say that we can defy hopelessness. We can write a new story in the unholy land that exists today, and we must keep that hope alive. I want to share with you a poem that I wrote a while back when I was at a conference on Israel-Palestine. I was sitting in a restaurant, and all of a sudden I was watching this bird flying around in this restaurant, and it struck me, and here it is. It's called the restaurant bird. The restaurant bird hopping floor to chair to beam, dancing away from servers' feet and patrons' demands, now air, looking for scraps. Can this compare to freedom? Does she remember ancient swaying olive trees and dandelions, golden bright, dew on poppies, brilliant red, in damp, wildly wonderful fields where she took flight? Or have these walls stolen hope and self and soul? Please, those who live behind oppressor's wall, trapped by others' perversity, hold on. We will tear down this bloody wall. They will not win. This wall will fall. Let the memory of true flight stir within you. May it grip your fragile heart with hope. Oh, startled while I meander out the door by the restaurant bird flying past me into freedom. That happened. That happened. Couldn't believe it. So let us hear the words of Bishop Tutu, Archbishop Tutu, who lived in apartheid South Africa, where all seemed hopeless until it was not. And let us hear it as a prayer, a closing prayer. Let us pray. We are made for goodness. We are made for love. We are made for friendliness. We are made for togetherness. We are made for all the beautiful things that you and I know. We are made to tell the world that there are no outsiders. All are welcome. Black, white, red, yellow, rich, poor, educated, not educated, male, female, gay, straight, all. We all belong to this family, this human family, God's family. So listening to Bishop Tutu and the cries for peace and freedom in Palestine, Israel, let us go out now with courage, with hope, and with Lenten blessings to bring hope to the world by stepping up and stepping in. Lenten blessings to each one of you. Amen and good night. Bye all. It's been great to be with you. Thank you.